What's up? Hey, BT Young Adults. Welcome to the Paper Room Podcast. Today is episode 25, which is going to be my birthday soon in August. August 3rd. And so if you are tuning in for the first time, first of all, we're super thankful for all of our listeners, all of our supporters, all the people that love Paper Room. It's so encouraging when we get to hear, just how it's helping people, and especially those that travel and get to go on long road trips. Of course, use our Paper Room podcast for that. Keep you company while you're at the gym, whatever you want. Super thankful for you all. But if this is your first time and you don't really know what's going on, what our podcast is about, Paper Room is a podcast centered around helping young adults navigate life as they're following Jesus, as they're living out the Christian life, what that looks like in all aspects of marriage, of college, of getting a job, of having a career, of family, of friendships. And so we just hope that this is an encouragement to young adults making all those kind of decisions in life, and how to glorify and honor Jesus. And this is usually hosted by Pastor Danny, Pastor Nick, and myself, Isha. But today looks a little bit different because it's just me. And Megan is joining us today, in case you guys are just listening on Spotify and not watching. It is just me and Megan today. Megan is our young adult intern for the summer, and yes, super thankful that you're on our team. Megan, what's your favorite color? When's your birthday? And tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Hello. My favorite color is probably teal, for aqua sure. Version, green, a little green in there. My birthday is December 27th, so Christmas baby. Oh. And yeah, I'm the intern here at BT Young Adults. I'm super excited about this. It's crazy how God just opened doors for you when you accept, and when you accept the calling he has on your life, and I'm just super humbled to be here.
That's awesome. You've been doing a great job so far.
Thank you.
What's it like coming in and whoa, I work here now in BT?
It's really cool. I've been at this church my whole life, and it's definitely cool getting a different perspective of it, working here and seeing how behind the scenes of how ministry works and what that's like. And yeah, I'm super, super passionate about it. It's an awesome thing when God just is here you go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's awesome. Well, as you guys can see on the title of this episode, it's a little bit different because Megan is actually going to introduce to us a passion project of hers that she's going to start. This will be a segment of episodes throughout the Paper Room. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about Uncomfortable?
Wow. So this kind of came from Ruth. I remember reading Ruth back in the beginning of this year. And I remember writing down in my journal, Ruth left her comfort for the uncomfortable. And I remember just processing that as I was reading Ruth about how once she did that, so many blessings of abundantly from God were added to her. And I feel there's so much power in that. And so my heart for this podcast and the Uncomfortable series is that that we would walk in the uncomfortable experience God has for us. And I think we can relate to Ruth. Obviously that was a long time ago, and maybe I can't really relate to our situations, but she went through death. She went through moving to a new place. I think there are times in life where God calls us somewhere, and we don't want to go there, but there's a purpose in that. And Ruth followed in that. Changing religions, learning to surrender, learning to trust again, leaving behind her past, walking away from her comfort into a whole new situation that she had no idea what was to come, and embracing her future. And she also left her past when she embraced the future, because her past was filled with her old God, her family, and she now had embraced this new future that she didn't know what held, because she was going to a whole new place. Yeah. And I think a lot of young adults can relate to that. I mean, we're going through college, we're going through new seasons, and God will call us to different places to move in. It's going to be uncomfortable, but also there's going to be so much comfort found in that because we're placing our trust in God.
That's good.
And I think she didn't let her situation depict her level of comfort. So yeah, my heart for this whole uncomfortable episode is that young adults would go closer to Christ by embracing their uncomfortable situations. And my hope is that we would learn to embrace the all in, that we wouldn't run from the uncomfortable, that we wouldn't say, hey, God, this is way too much for me. You called the wrong person.
Right, yeah.
That instead we would go all in and be like, okay, God, like this is really hard for me. I don't like this season I'm in. I don't like the place you have me in, but I'm going to trust you and know that in this uncomfortable season, you're going to provide me with so much more comfort and peace than I couldn't have imagined, even if I was living in comfort somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because we're walking with God.
That's good.
And so I hope that we would learn to be the generation that embraces the uncomfortable, just so that we can further the kingdom of God, and wouldn't let the depiction of the world of their comfort distract us, that we would keep our eyes focused on Jesus. So this is why I have Isha here.
Hi.
These episodes that I have a desire for, that God has placed on my heart, will all be interviews of different people who I feel like have faced uncomfortable situations or battles, but they walked in it with confidence with God. And so Isha, I've known her for about 8 years. She was my leader when I was a freshman in high school. I'm about to be a senior in college, so known her quite a bit.
They all grow up so fast. No, I had to double check the years because I feel like, oh no, I've only been at BT for 5 years, but I've been on staff for 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been here at BT as long as we've known each other.
Yeah. And
So-
you've been a part of ministry though for
Yeah.
Yeah. And through a lot of our conversations, from when she was my leader to even now being one of my best friends, it's surrounded a lot about being single and our desire for marriage. She's married now. I'm not. But the desire for that, of wanting to be married, of wanting to be a wife. And I think a lot of young adults can relate to that. I feel like that's the topic of conversation with my friends and with all of us. And so I wanted to dive deep into that today. I think we've talked about how there can be a lot of wastefulness in the gift of singleness because we as young adults are stubborn and we don't want to accept the fact that we're single. So yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. I'm ready. I'm ready for your questions.
You're ready? Okay. So basic, how did you waste your single years?
Okay. Well, I want to preface by saying some people will click on this episode and find out, okay, we're talking about singleness, and then look at me, the interviewee, and see, okay, she's married. I'm not going to listen to this because I'm not currently single, and that's okay. Like, totally get it. Totally understand. But as Megan was introducing this topic to me, it has always been a huge passion of mine to talk about relationships because of the mess that I put myself through. So I also want to be very careful with the word waste, because waste is a very strong word. And I believe that as we're believers walking through life and we make mistakes, we do stupid stuff, that God doesn't waste any of that. He doesn't waste it. And so I think it can be a very negative term, but at the same time it reflects our actions and the things that we can do in our life. So I will be careful with saying the word waste, but I looked up a different word today to use a different word for that. And there's a word called prodigality.
Okay, big word.
Like being a prodigal, like the prodigal son, right?
Oh,
so it's an action of being reckless with what you've been given. And that's
good.
literally my life, my life as a single person. So looking at that part of my life, for 22 years, I was single in the unmarried sense. So anybody that's not married, you're technically single, but I was never ever truly single for that long, and that's a problem. And that's why I feel so passionate about talking about singleness, because I know what it's like to waste it, like we're talking about today. I don't need to get into my whole testimony and everything, but I grew up just fixated on relationships, and I was a very romantical kid, like hopeless romantic kind of kid. I would write little like short stories in my little journal, like as a kid, like, oh, and then she met the prince, whatever, like always thinking about this. It's just how I was wired. So I didn't know Christ. I didn't come to know him until I was already graduated out of high school. So all of that time I literally spent all of that time thinking about taking action on having a boyfriend, getting into relationships, having a crush, like non-stop. And no one ever told me that there was something wrong with it. I would only learn from my mistakes and feel embarrassed about it. So after I came to know Christ, I was alone. So I was saved alone. I went into college alone. I was not a part of a church community. And then I jumped into a toxic relationship alone. I was by myself. And I had no one else to kind of teach me what relationships, what living a single life looks like as a Christ follower. And so after the one, right? The one. After the one that I thought was going to be the one ended up not being the one, I went looking for another one and another one. Living in the church culture at that time also, there was just a lot of options, I guess, of like Christ followers, right? Like other guys that were here at church. Okay, so those are options, right? Because they're obviously coming to church, they're serving God. But it was a constant seeking out of what was going to be next for me. And it was exhausting. It was embarrassing for myself. I don't think I embarrassed anybody else, but maybe, probably. Yeah, I broke hearts. And I'm not proud to say that. So it has been a part of my life that I've not been proud of at all, but that I have learned to use to help others and learn to say, okay, God didn't waste it. I'm not going to let my stupid mistakes go to waste. I want to help other people open their eyes to be taught to see what it really, really looks like to not chase after things like that.
That's so good. I like how you said you kept chasing after the one. I think a lot of us are doing that. What would you say to the person who is being reckless in their singleness and only chasing after the one?
Jesus needs to be the one for you, for every single one of us. This doesn't just fall under like relationships. Like if you are chasing money, if you are chasing the bag, like that needs to be replaced with Jesus. If you are chasing anything that is not a pursuit of Christ, it needs to be filled with Christ instead. And that desire is very natural for us to want more, to seek more, to fulfill an emptiness that's inside of us. And that emptiness is something different for everyone. Drugs, alcohol, relationships, sex, whatever it is that will help us feel satisfied for a time. It's like that for everyone. It's a different thing for everyone. For me, it was relationships, to be loved, to love someone. I had no clue, no idea that Jesus could fill that for me. And I wish someone did. I wish someone told me.
That's so good. There is so much power in placing your full identity in God and not of this world. So in that, like, how did you become self-aware that you were being reckless in your singleness? And for those listening who are single right now, how can they become self-aware?
So I feel like this kind of self-awareness happened really big, like a climactic happening twice in my life. The first time was when I came to know Jesus. That's how he drew me to him, was when I became so tired of doing things my own way, so tired of chasing after the relationships in high school. And that's what drew me to Christ. So I accepted him. I realized, like, okay, he needs to be on the throne of my heart. And that was my first self-awareness. But then, like I said, like I was alone. So I was kind of needing to teach myself just by reading God's word, what it looks like to then be single. So I didn't teach myself very well. I'm not a very good teacher for myself. But that self-awareness came again 4 years later, I think. And it was so weird. It was like, before I knew Christ, I was chasing after the relationships. And then it was like a Christian version of that. It was so weird. Again, just not having the proper knowledge of what I was really doing. But there are serious consequences to your actions.
Yeah.
And what I was doing was letting myself go to different people that were not my husband. I probably kissed way too many men that were not my husband. I opened the vault of my personal life to too many people that were not my husband. And I learned like the problems that came from that. I ended up breaking myself. Like I ended up really breaking my own heart because I felt like so many pieces of myself were with so many people. And I just felt like I wasn't myself. I had no idea who I really was, aside from being this person's crush or this person's girlfriend, whatever.
Yeah.
So that self-awareness came at the end of 2020, and it was so clear. It had never been so clear to me how much I needed Jesus. Like, that was one huge area of my life that I had not surrendered to him fully. And it was so clear to me. I knew what I was doing wrong. And it's not that I was doing anything that was like, like major sin, you know what I mean? But anything, like I said, like anything that isn't chasing after Jesus, you're kind of on the wrong path. So so I became self-aware by evaluating myself and letting God prune me. Like just letting go, opening my hands and my heart and just saying, I am so done. Like I am done doing this by myself. God, I just needed to be you and me. Like, thank you for calling me. I was so thankful. And after I made that decision, like I'm not talking to anyone. Like, that's how it was for me. Just a very physical, mental decision. Like, no DMs, like no texting, just me and God. For however long he sees fit. I felt so much freedom. So much freedom. I forgot the second part of your question, but that's how I became self-aware. Like, man, this is not fulfilling for me.
Well, the second part was just how would you help others? But I feel like you kind of talked about that.
Don't do what I did. That's
But in that, I feel like you said in the beginning question when I asked you that you felt so alone, that you went into every place, every step, every new season alone. And I think a part of being self-aware is having that accountability partner
100%.
Of that discipleship, of someone discipling you. And I feel like that goes along with being self-aware because you're having someone walk you through it. Not someone necessarily telling you, hey, you're messing up, but someone being there to guide you towards Christ and what he would want for you. And I know we've talked about this. That was a part of you being single, was then having discipleship. How did you feel like that helped or guided you in your singleness?
That really took off when I made that decision, really taking my discipleship seriously and also having a better knowledge of what it looks like to be discipled. I was 100% like, I'm all in, like you're saying. Like, I'm all in for accountability. Like, I need someone to know my decisions before I make them. Not because I need that much babysitting, but because I learned, like, when I make stupid decisions, it's 100% just me in my brain, and I need someone else on the other side who's godly, who loves me, who cares about the decisions I make, to hear and then to guide and kind of direct, to affirm whether or not, like, hey, this is not, where you should be going. Discipleship was huge. And then when it did come time to, like, okay, I might want to step my foot into the dating pool again, that discipleship came through again of like, I'm feeling fear now. Like, I don't want to mess up again. I'm feeling, really uncertain, really scared that this is the right thing. And so having that person that's like, okay, well, ask yourself these things. Do you feel this when you go, or whatever about this person? Like, it is so helpful, so needed.
Definitely. I feel like discipleship has been a huge part in growing in my faith with God, because accountability is so important. So what would you say? I think there's a huge misconception. I'm not married, but that once you become married, everything falls into place. For the single heart, for the single-minded, you think, well, this is like my idol at this point, because I've made it my idol because of how much I desire to be married. And so I know once that happens, everything's going to be perfect. But that's obviously a misconception, because relationships are going to fail us like any other idol that, you know, isn't God.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest myth when it comes to relationships, aside from like having a one, like the one.
Yeah.
And I think it really comes from, and I think a lot of young adults like end up going down this kind of path of like, man, I'm spiraling down into this desire. This is all I want. That comes from a lack of solid teaching and proper education of what God says about dating, about sex, about relationships. Anyway, so I went off on a tangent, but that's a lot of where it comes from. Also, like toxic purity culture, growing up in church, social pressure, and like church people pressure to be married. Yeah, all of that deeply factors into somebody only desiring this. Yeah. And so it can definitely create this fanatical kind of perspective on what my life would look like if I only had this. Yeah. But it's actually very, very dangerous, because then we're putting all of our hope into a person instead of into Jesus. And I think if you take the proper premarital counseling, you'll realize that very quickly, because they will, you know, the counselor will make sure that you are not finding your happiness in a person. Yeah. I mean, so many, you know, I don't know the stats. I'm not the stat guy. Danny's not here.
We don't have the stat guy today.
But, you know, I can't imagine the stats of couples that are going to marriage counseling, you know, probably on the verge of divorce, that are saying, well, I'm just not happy. They don't make me happy anymore. Yeah. And that's a cause of, well, you shouldn't have put your happiness, your hope into that person in the first place. But what the way to turn this around, this myth, is to look at it like this is a gift that God gave us, and it's not a requirement for us to fulfill. It is not a commandment to be married. We are not walking in sin if we are not married, and we're honoring God with our single life. We are not less than, we are not inferior to somebody who is married. And just another thing to prevent would just be saving all of your baggage, like holding it all in, like the stuff that you need to deal with before you get married, or things that would be so helpful for you to unpack before you get married. A lot of times people will hold that in because they want to protect the happiness of the relationship. Nobody wants conflict. If this is something that you've been desiring for so long and you finally have it, you have the perfect person that God made for you, and he gave you this gift. A lot of times we harbor the stuff that we think is wrong, that make us uncomfortable, that we haven't let go, that we haven't opened the vault. So then when you enter into marriage and things get rough, life happens, you are opening yourself up to a whole lot of harm. And the good thing is that now you're one, so you kind of have no choice. Like, there's no backing out of this. I don't believe in divorce. I believe it happens. I don't believe it's an option for me, for me and Ben. But you're one now. Yeah. So the good thing is, like, okay, at least we're solid, like we're together, but you are causing so much burden and heaviness to now fall on your partner because you had this idea that everything would be just happiness because you're together. Yeah. And while a lot of that is true, like, okay, you're together now, but the enemy is going to attack any marriage that's following Christ, big time, because now it's two Christ followers, like, wanting to pursue Jesus and his will. So, huge myth, but also very preventable, very breakable for us to break down.
That was so good. I feel like you hit it on the nail when you said they're happy, and so they're trying to go into another happy state. They don't want to face the reality of their situation. Hard. Yeah. And I feel like that's why there's such a high divorce rate, because they're so unhappy in their singleness and they're trying to find that happiness. So they just go straight into marriage without fixing the root or placing their identity in Jesus.
Yes, 100%.
Facing the reality that they're not going to be happy once they're in marriage. That unhappiness is still going to be there because they're still empty inside.
And what helped me understand this wasn't just like I woke up one day and realized like, oh, I need to find joy in Christ alone. Like I helped myself by reading books. Like thankfully our young adult ministry kicked off, and so we have amazing teaching, biblical teaching, people that you can talk to and get discipled from. But I read Outdated. Forgot the author's name.
Jonathan Bakuda.
Jonathan. JP. Okay. Yeah, of course I forgot. Okay. Outdated was a great one. Kind of very straightforward on dating.
Really good book.
Also, I read Loveology. Me and Ben read that one together before we got married. You don't have to wait until you're dating somebody to read it. It is just it's very educational about sex, love, and marriage. And there was another one. I kind of forgot. But like reading these things are so good to help you understand, like, okay, this is kind of how it's supposed to be. Like, this is how I can find joy where I am and be comfortable where I am.
That's awesome. Finding joy.
Comfort.
Yeah. So closing this up, what advice would you give to the single person right now who just wants to stay in their comfort reality bubble in the world instead of facing the uncomfortable of their single life, admitting that they're single, and then walking in confidence with that, letting God lead them in that singleness of the gift he has given them?
Yeah, I think, man, it's hard, and it can feel very lonely too, because although you can find community in that group of guys that are always talking about girls, or that group of girls that are always talking about guys, that kind of desire and that longing that you have can feel like you're the only one really, really, really longing for that. And that's why, of course, we're talking about accountability, talking to somebody about the desires you have, the hopes that you have for your future. Like, share that with somebody that you trust, that cares about you. But another thing I would say is to please don't make your relationship status your identity. I think it's so, like, it's almost like it's a cutesy thing to do, or like a wannabe cringy thing to do, to say, like, to joke about singleness a lot. And okay, like, don't take life so seriously. You can joke about it. You can use humor to, like, lighten the load a little bit. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, be aware of using that kind of humor toward your singleness, saying, like, negative connotations about it on yourself a lot can really impact the way you're starting to think about it. Maybe it's the other way around too. Like, as soon as you start talking to somebody, then that becomes everything,
Yeah.
So I would say we can do a lot of self-evaluation. Ask yourself questions like, what do I think about the most? What do I talk about the most? Where do I find myself? How do I find myself behaving, in certain arenas? Like, evaluate everything. Yeah. But at the same time, we can only be the best teachers for ourselves until God comes in and he's the best teacher that we have. Yeah. So I think what really changed the game for me, and what can really change the game for young adults, is opening yourself up to God, letting him be the one to evaluate everything, to prune you, to strip you of things that you cling on to. That's where our discomfort comes from, that grows us, is when God is in there. He's working.
1,000%.
I love that we have such great teaching every other Tuesday, but we also have great teaching on Sundays. We also have great teaching from very experienced in life, godly people that are in the church community. And then standing up for what God says about relationships can really just kind of take your mentality to the next level.
Yeah.
It's more than just like, save yourself for marriage and, you know, like, does he love Jesus? Yeah. Like, that's kind of the youth group thing to say. And then, of course, we're diving deeper into that for our youth ministries. But just really letting God in.
Yeah.
is what changes everything, because if we can't be honest with God, we're definitely not going to be honest with ourselves, and we're not going to be honest with our future partners.
Yeah.
So it's just a huge, super important area of life that does not have to suck.
Yeah.
Like we've said before.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have to suck. And we ourselves get in the way of ourselves all the time. So I would say, get help. not in a
discipleship. Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Get some help. But in a loving way. Like,
invite someone
help
in.
yourself to get help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Invite someone in.
And I think that inviting God in creates so much intimacy with him.
Yes.
And it's okay that it sucks. You know, it's okay that it feels uncomfortable and weird. Like Isha said, that discomfort is just going to grow you and create even more intimacy with God, to where he's going to be the first person you go to when you are feeling so uncomfortable or so in your head about the fact that you are single. It's just going to create so much more value and identity there and grow
Make him everything.
Yeah.
Like, I've said this 100 times. That's probably why I didn't want to say it again. But Jesus needs to be everything to you.
Yeah.
And that question that I asked earlier, like, what do you think about? What do you talk about the most? Like, for everyone, not just the people that are single, that really desire marriage. Like, for everyone, the answer should be Jesus. Yeah. That's our standard.
Yeah.
So for me, I need to work on that too, even if I'm married.
Yeah.
Jesus needs to be what I think about the most. Honoring God is what I need to talk about the most. I need to talk about him the most. So making him everything fixes everything.
1,000%. Well, I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Man,
this was awesome.
There's a lot more that I could say, but you know, I'm available. So
DM her, text her, meet
send
her in
me a
person.
DM, you know, yeah. It was good.
This was good. I'm so excited for what's to come with Uncomfortable. It's gonna be awesome, and I can't wait.
Yeah, definitely praying for Megan. We'll see y'all for our next Paper Room episode, but pretty soon we'll have another Uncomfortable episode, so y'all be praying for Megan and for the impact that those episodes specifically are going to have on young adults. So
yeah,
we'll see y'all soon.
See you soon.
Share this with somebody that you know.
Yeah.
Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.